Hello, Alex Sasser here, hosting another episode of Touching Lives with Dr. James Merritt. Today's message is coming up, but first let me share with you a few updates about our ministry. The annual Mountaintop Conference in beautiful Pigeon Forge, Tennessee is scheduled for September 30th through October 2nd. Go to mountaintopconference.com for more information and to book your tickets. Next, be sure to download the free Touching Lives mobile app on your smartphone where you can watch Dr. Merritt's sermons, read daily devotionals, and study the Bible anytime, anywhere. Simply search for Touching Lives in the App Store to find the app. And finally, if you ever have any prayer needs, be sure to call our help center at 800-413-1131 or go to our prayer wall on our website at touchinglives.org to leave your request there. Thank you for joining us today. And now here's today's sermon from Dr. James Merritt.
One of the signs of good health is a good appetite. And there's only one thing that will satisfy a good appetite, and that's good food, but there lies the problem. What is good food? Well, we all have our different definitions of what good food is, and what good food is to you may not be good food to me, but the way I would define good food and the way my doctor would define good food can be entirely different. I define good food purely by taste. When I eat something, I'm asking one question: is this good to me? Now, my doctor defines good food entirely different. His standard is nutrition. He has one question: is it good for me? Frankly, I don't even want to know sometimes if what I'm eating is good for me, if it's good to me. And fruit is one of those magical foods that meets both criteria. Because fruit is not only good to the tongue, it's good for the body. In fact, I don't know that I've ever met a person who didn't like some type of fruit. You know, our great-great-grandmothers knew the benefits of fruit long before medical science began proving that eating fruit's one of the best things you can do for your body. And so if you are a fruit eater, good news for you. If you're not, you might want to start, because here's some few benefits of fruits. There are digestive benefits. For you Metamucil fans, most fruits function as natural laxatives, helping to regulate the body's digestive process. Many fruits are filled with roughage and with fiber. That's why when you eat an apple, always eat the peeling. And then there's another benefit. Fruit is protective. Fruits are filled with vitamin C and A and E, and they're very, very important antioxidants. And then there are, this is one good for me, anti-aging benefits. Scientists have now discovered that the bright colors of many fruits are actually another source of benefit. The pigments that make blueberries blue and strawberries red are actually something called phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are powerful antioxidants that help protect the body against cancer that causes free radicals, and it helps slow down the effects of aging. So if you're like me, go out and buy a lot of fruit. And then there are intellectual benefits. Studies have shown that a diet high in fruit can help prevent many of the symptoms of diseases like Alzheimer's and other deteriorating conditions of the brain. As a matter of fact, the USDA even recommends you eat at least 5 servings a day of fruit because they're so convinced of its benefits. Maybe that's why we read in God's Word that God is so interested in fruit. Have you ever thought about the fact that when God created Adam and Eve, they only had one thing to eat? There wasn't any cereal, wasn't any protein shakes, wasn't any hamburgers and fries. It was just fruit. In fact, God told Adam and Eve, you are free to eat fruit from any tree in the garden. The psalmist said that a righteous man is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season. The wisest man who ever lived, a king by the name of Solomon, said the fruit of the righteous is the tree of life. Jesus said the way you can tell the difference between a real believer and a false believer is by their fruit. By their fruit, you'll recognize them. Matter of fact, he went on to say, if you're really connected to Jesus, you will be like a branch connected to a vine. You will bear fruit. He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Now that raises a big question. Why so much emphasis on fruit? Why does God seem obsessed with fruit? Why does God want us to be just like fruit? Why does he have a strong desire that we bear fruit? Well, it's because He wants us to live a life in such a way that it's good to others and it's good for others. In other words, He wants our lives to be tasty. He wants us to live lives that are so attractive that people are drawn to us like a hungry man is to a plate of good food. And when he eats it, it's not only good to him, it's good for him, and he wants to eat more. But that raises a question. So what kind of fruit could I possibly bear in my life that would make me so tasty? And how could I become that kind of a fruitful person? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because the answer to both questions is found in two of the greatest verses in the Bible that we're actually going to be studying for the next 9 weeks. It's in a book called Galatians chapter 5, and this is what we read. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, if you don't think those qualities are super important, let me ask you a question. You're married. Here's my question. Do you think your marriage would be healthier and happier if both of you bore that kind of fruit in your marriage? You own a business. Do you think your business would be better if your employees and you displayed that kind of fruit with each other on a daily basis? How about your friends? Do you think your friendships would be stronger and more beneficial if you and your friend constantly bore that kind of fruit? I ask myself as a pastor, do I think my church would be more attractive if my church was filled with people of love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? You better believe it. But before you say this is impossible, I got to give you the bad news and the good news. The bad news is you cannot bear this fruit by yourself. You cannot manufacture these qualities on your own. Can't do it. Here's the good news. Once you become a follower of Jesus Christ, He puts His Holy Spirit in you. You don't have to work to produce the fruit. He will bear the fruit through you. Let me give you an illustration. You ever seen a cocktail tree? I've never seen one before, but this is a picture of a cocktail tree. Now, if you could see it as closely as I could, you'd recognize something. This tree is actually a combination of numerous citrus trees that have all been grafted into one tree. So you can go to one cocktail tree and you'll find lemons, you'll find limes, you'll find oranges, you'll find grapefruits, and they're all growing out of one tree. Now, each fruit is different. Each fruit has its unique characteristics, but they all share the same trunk and they all share the same root system. We are just like that. God wants us to be just like a cocktail tree. He wants us to bear on the various branches of our lives these 9 different fruit. And by the way, the word fruit in these verses is not plural, it is singular. They're not fruits of the Spirit. You don't get to pick and choose. Well, I'm not really into patience, but I would like a lot of joy. It doesn't work that way. The Spirit wants to bear all of this fruit. These are the fruit of the Spirit. And when you are dominated and controlled by the Holy Spirit, you will bear all 9 qualities of these in your life. So, today we're starting with the first fruit, which is love. The fruit of the Spirit is love. Now, I don't believe that's coincidental. I don't believe that's incidental. I believe that is fundamental. I believe there is a reason why Paul put love first. You say, why? Get this in your heart. Without love, you will not bear the other 8 qualities, at least on a consistent basis. The fountain of all the other fruit is love. They all flow out of love. In fact, I'll tell you how important love is. Jesus told a lawyer one time in the Old Testament, you could basically summarize the 39 books of the Old Testament and all of the laws in the Old Testament in one single word: love. He said you could summarize the entire law in 2 commands. Love God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. So, what does love look like? What do we mean by love? Let me just go ahead and tell you, it's not what Hollywood means by love. It's not what a younger generation means by love. It's not what a lot of us were taught about love as we watched TV or went to the movies or read romantic novels. And how can a person show their love to others? And how can others know that they're loved by you? How can we have this kind of love? What does it look like? Well, I want to invite you to join me in one of the greatest chapters in this book that's ever been written. It's in a book called Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. It's in the New Testament. We're in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It is the greatest description of love ever written in the history of the world. One of my favorite authors, Max Lucado, said, "This is the Mount Everest of writings about love." And I want to really, as we study these fruit and we think about this particular fruit, I want you to really think about something. If you're really a loving person, you think you are. You're a loving husband, wife, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, or friend. You would say, yeah, I'm a loving person. Okay, we're going to do a love checkup. Let's just see how loving you really are. Let's put your love under the microscope of the fruit of the Holy Spirit called love, and let's see how your love matches up. Because if you really are bearing the fruit of love, three things will be true about your life. First of all, your abilities will be elevated by love. Your abilities will be elevated by love. Now listen to what Paul begins by saying. He said, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. You think Paul's trying to make a point about love? By the way, the word that Paul uses there, no fewer than 9 times in this one chapter, is the word agape, which is really found rarely outside the Bible. See, the Greeks had 2 words for love. One was eros. We get the word erotic from that. And you can imagine that referred to kind of a sexual love between a man and a woman. The other word they used was the word philos. We get the word Philadelphia from that. Philos, love, adelphos, brother, brotherly love. Philos refers to kind of the warm, noble affection between 2 great friends. Now, both of those loves are somewhat dependent, of course, on the person that's being loved. And so we tend to give sexual love to those that we are married to, those we find physically attractive. And we tend to give friendly love to those that we like. But agape love is different. This describes a love that is based on the deliberate choice of the one who loves rather than the worthiness of the one who is loved. In other words, it's the kind of love that is not always natural. It's supernatural. It's the kind of love that on your own you would never give, but through the Holy Spirit you want to give. It's a love that you give where you expect nothing in return. As a matter of fact, it's a love that you give many times when you know you won't get anything in return. And what Paul is saying here is, God is not impressed with your abilities. God's not impressed with how well you do something nearly as much as why you do it. By the way, if you know anything about the New Testament, you may have noticed it, but Paul was basically listing some spiritual gifts here. And if you go back and read 1 Corinthians 12 before this chapter, 1 Corinthians 14 after this chapter, he's talking about spiritual gifts. So he talks about people who have the gift of tongues, and people with the gift of prophecy, and the gift of knowledge, and the gift of faith, and the gift of giving, and even those who have the gift of their own life. And you know what Paul says? Take all of your pedigree, take all of your degrees, take all of your abilities, take all of your gifts. He says, the only thing that makes you anything is love. There is no substitute for loving God and loving others. Matter of fact, did you know that every other pagan religion in the world practices these spiritual gifts? There are pagan religions that practice speaking in tongues. There are other religions that claim to prophesy. Practically every religion has some kind of faith. Many religions practice giving to the poor. We've certainly seen how in many religions they're willing to give their lives for something they believe, even though it's not true. And the point is where we get so impressed with spiritual gifts, God's more impressed with spiritual fruit. God says, look, I don't care if you speak in tongues. I don't care if you prophesy. I don't care if you've got the gift of leadership. I don't care if you have the gift of giving. I don't care if you've got the gift of administration. What I want to know is, what is the fruit of your life? What kind of fruit are you bearing? See, where we're so impressed with what people do, God is more impressed with why people do it. That's why the real mark of a follower of Jesus is not your activity, it's your affection. Everything you do for the church, for your family, for your friends, even for your boss, shouldn't really even be motivated by a paycheck. It ought to be out of love, if not for your boss and not for your company, love for God. Love for God so that you do your best. Love for God so that you'll be your best. And then love for others so they'll see you at your best. So if you really are a loving person, you really are, your abilities will be elevated by love. People won't be talking about how heavy a load you can carry. They'll be talking about how mighty a love you have in your heart. Here's the second thing that will be true. Your actions will be motivated by love. Your abilities will be elevated by love, but your actions will be motivated by love. Now, Paul gets down to the nitty-gritty of what real love looks like. And let me just stop and tell you this right now, because you may as well get in line and get behind me. You're not going to like some of the things he says, because when you really see what real love is, you're going to find out, like I do, I think I got to do some work on my love. Listen to what he says. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Whew! He gives us 14 characteristics of love. You talk about a checkup from the neck up. You talk about a look down from the look down. Some of these are described positively, some are described negatively. There are some things that love practices. There are some things that love prohibits. There are some things that love will do. There are some things that love will not do. So let's get started. You ready? Love is patient. If you could imagine love as like a fleet of ships, the flagship of love is patience. Now, the very word is interesting. It's composed actually of two words. The first word is themia, which gives us the word thermometer. That refers to heat or passion. And the second word is macro, which is the opposite of micro. It means long. So what it literally Paul was saying was, love is long-tempered, not short-tempered. It is long-tempered. In other words, love has a long fuse. Love takes a long time to boil. It takes love a long time to get angry. It has a long fuse, but it takes love only a short time to get over it. It has a short memory. Let me ask you a question. You have a quick temper, you're not loving. You hold grudges you don't forget, you're not loving. Love is patient. Then he said this, love is kind. Love is kind. You know what kindness is. It's when you do something good for someone just out of the goodness of your heart. As a matter of fact, that word was even used to describe food that was tasty as well as healthy. The author Mark Twain said, kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. So let me ask you a question. What would you say your kindness quotient is? From 0 to 100. What is your kindness quotient? So here's a question. When was the last time you did something kind for someone in your family, someone at work, someone in your neighborhood without even being asked? How is your love measuring up? Love's patient. Love's kind. Love does not envy. Love isn't jealous. I cannot tell you how many marriages I've seen destroyed by jealousy. Let me tell you something. You may think, well, I'll tell you why I'm so jealous of my wife, because I love her. No, if you're jealous, you don't love her like you should. Well, I'll tell you why I'm so jealous of my husband. It's because I love him. No, if you're jealous, you don't love him like you should. Dr. James Dobson said, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. There's another version I read that said this, if you love something, set it free. If it doesn't come back to you, track it down and beat it to death. Now, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply telling you, love is not jealous. I made a promise to Teresa when we got married. I had a little problem with jealousy because she's so beautiful and still is so beautiful. But I made a promise to her. I said, I promise you, the day we get married, and I know you're mine, because I know you'll keep your vow and I know I will keep mine. I will never be jealous again. And I have not. Love releases. Love releases. Love sets free. Envy possesses. Jealousy imprisons. How's your love measuring up? Love does not envy. Real love is glad for the good that's in another person, glad for the good that comes to another person. Someone wisely said, every time you turn green with envy, you are ripe for trouble. How's your love doing? Well, let's keep going. Love does not boast. You know, sometimes it's even harder to love when you're the successful person. I mean, have you ever known anybody that completely changed once they came into a lot of money or once they got a big promotion? I've known people, I've seen people in my ministry, they came into a big promotion, they got a bigger position, they started making a lot more money than they ever knew they would make before, and it totally changed them. They used to have time for you, right? But they don't have time anymore. They used to take your calls, but the phone doesn't seem to be picked up anymore. Well, real love not only accepts other people when they're successful, real love also accepts people when they are less successful. Love doesn't boast. How's your love doing? Love does not dishonor others. That's a word we need to hear today. The word there for dishonor refers to shameful or disgraceful behavior. I mean, no need to elaborate there. Simply put, there's a love quality that we don't find a lot these days, and it's just old-fashioned courtesy. So let me tell you what I mean. Love doesn't cut in line. It doesn't cut people short. It doesn't cut people down. It doesn't, when somebody cuts in front of you in traffic, love doesn't blow the horn. Love doesn't give an obscene gesture. Love doesn't lose its temper. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. I mean, if anything defines true love, it's this. Love is a selfless love. You know what it is? It's loving you. Listen, it is loving you before you love me, love. If I really love you, I'm going to love you if you don't love me back. I'm going to love you if you don't reciprocate my love. It has nothing to do with how you do or do not love me. I'm going to love you. It is not self-seeking. You know, ever so often, we'll say to someone, I love you. And we don't really mean, hey, I made a commitment to place my needs above, place your needs above my needs. So often we'll tell somebody we love them, and you know what we're really saying? I love you because of what you do for me. Or I love you because you make me feel good. Or I love you because you meet my needs. And what you're doing right now is working for the person that I truly love most, which is me, and that's why I love you. Listen, real love loves others not because of what we can get from them. It loves others because of what we can give to them. How's your love making it? How's your love doing? Mine's not too hot in some of these categories, I can tell you. Let's keep going. Love's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. In other words, the first place that love goes when somebody does you wrong, it goes to grace. Love allows people to make mistakes. By the way, that word there is an accounting term or a bookkeeping term. It literally says, love does not keep a ledger on evil. Love doesn't hold a grudge. You know, I've said before, it has a very long fuse but a short memory. Love is quick to forgive and quick to forget. That's hard for us to do. Because let's face it, we all tend to keep records, mental records, when other people do us wrong. You know why we keep records of? You know why when somebody does us wrong, we kind of file that in this steel file cabinet that's right behind our heart? You know why? So we can bring it up at another time. So we can tell somebody else what they did to us. Or so we get a chance sometime, we can let that person have it for the way they treated us. Love doesn't do that. It doesn't keep a record of the wrongs that are done to you, but it's also a refusal to keep a record of the things you've done right. There was a friend of mine a few years ago. He was talking about one of the most arrogant emails he had ever gotten from a woman who claimed to be her friend. But all this woman did was brag about all the good things she had ever done for her. See, real love doesn't keep a record of your wrongs, and real love doesn't keep a record of my rights. Is your love making the grade? Here's another one. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. Now, this is the tough part of love. Because when you really love someone, listen, when you really love someone, you are willing to both tell them the truth when they need to hear it. But if you really love someone, you're willing to receive the truth when you need to hear it. It may be painful. It may not be pleasant, but you need it. And if you have a friend who cannot hear truth and will not receive truth, I got news for you. They're really not your friend. And if you have a friend who's not willing to tell you the truth, when you need to hear the truth, they are not your friend. So let's just take all of these characteristics. So let's be honest. You're now the teacher giving out a grade, okay? What grade would you give your love right now? Plus or minus? Don't you say A plus or you'll really be lying. Okay, really, what kind of a grade would you give your love? Would you say, if you're a person of real love, would you say that your love is marked by what this love looks like? But there's a third thing that Paul says about love. He says your attitude will be saturated with love. Your attitude will be saturated with love. Your abilities will be elevated. Your actions will be motivated, but your attitude will be saturated with love. Now, here's what Paul's doing. Paul's really thrown a lot at us, right? I mean, he's really loaded our wagon. So he's put all this in this big box, and he's trying to think about, okay, how can I bring this full circle? How can I put a beautiful bow on this box of heavy stuff I've thrown at them? So he closes with this. He says, love, now watch this. This is so beautiful. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Now, there's a word that's repeated 4 times in that verse. It's one word in the Greek, 2 words in English. In English, it's all things, all things, all things, all things. But in the Greek language, it's one word. It's the Greek word panta. And you see it all the time in your dictionary, right? Pantheism. We get the word that from that Greek word panta. Pantheism is the belief that God is in all things. A pantry is a cupboard where you can store all things. A panacea is a cure for all things. A panoply is an array of all things. Panta or panta, however some people pronounce it differently, it means all things. And here's what Paul is saying. Love always looks for the good in the other person. Love's not negative. Love is positive. Now, listen, love does not look over people's faults. It just overlooks people's faults. That doesn't mean love is blind. You know, someone has well said, love is not blind. It sees more, not less, but it sees more. But because it sees more, it is willing to see less. Now, let me just tell you something that's true. It's true about me, true about you, and I've seen it in so many people. You can always find something negative about anybody. I don't care who it is. It can be the Pope, it can be the president, it can be your professor at school, it can be anybody. You can find something negative in anybody if you're willing to look hard enough. But I want to warn you of something. There is nothing that is a greater love killer, nothing, than being cynical and negative in fault finding toward other people. Years ago, I came across a poem. This has really happened. There was a 5th grader that wrote this poem on a sheet of paper. Listen to this poem. He said, Paul's girl is rich and haughty. My girl is as poor as clay. Paul's girl is young and pretty. My girl looks like a bale of hay. Paul's girl is smart and clever. My girl is dumb but good. Would I trade my girl for Paul's? You bet your life I would. Well, listen, we can always find bad in someone else or good in someone else. So why does Paul put love at the beginning of this list of all the qualities that make us tasty? Why does Paul want us to be so filled with the God kind of spirit, fruit-bearing love? Here's why. Love never fails. Love never fails. Here's what Paul was saying. If you love with the kind of love that's talked about in this chapter, if your love practices what it ought to practice, and if your love prohibits what it ought to prohibit, it will never fail. Let me just get real specific. The kind of love that we're talking about right now, that love will never fail in your marriage. Never. It will never fail in your home. It will never fail with your children. It will never fail with your parents. It will never fail with your siblings. It will never fail with your friends. It will never fail with the people that you work with and you go to school with. It will never fail in your job. It will never fail in the church. So no wonder Jesus said this. He said, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. See, love's like glue. It has the potential to create a bond, but only when it's released from its container. You know, if you want something to stick, you've got to apply it. So I just want you to listen to a covenant of love that you might want to consider using in your home or at your church. It's not original with me, by the way. It comes from a church out in Washington State that in 14 years has grown to several thousand people. And it's simply a commitment that the church has made to each other. I want you to listen to this. This is beautiful. You will never knowingly suffer at my hands. I will never say anything or do anything knowingly to hurt you. I will always in every circumstance seek to help and support you. If you're down and I can lift you up, I'll do that. If you need something and I have it, I'll share it with you. If I need to, I'll give it to you. No matter what I find out about you, no matter what happens in the future, either good or bad, my commitment to you will never change, and there is nothing you can do about it. So I want to get practical. I'm going to ask you today, before this day's over, get out a sheet of paper or a card. I want you to write a love note to somebody you know that needs it. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's one of your kids. Maybe it's a brother or sister. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's somebody at work. Maybe it's someone in a nursing home. Maybe it's somebody in a hospital. But somebody needs an encouraging word of love. I want you to write that down because the first fruit of a tasty life is love. And the more you love, the tastier you will be. For the love of God and the love of others, may God's Spirit bear His love through us, because it was that love that moved Him to give His Son to us.
We are so glad you tuned in here on the Touching Lives digital channel, and we hope you enjoyed the sermon today. Be sure to click and follow this page and feel free to leave any comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts from today's message. Look for a new episode to be posted on this channel each Sunday. In the meantime, check out our free resources at touchinglives.org and feel free to call us at 800-413-1131 with prayer needs or questions. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll see you right here next time for another episode of Touching Lives with Dr. James Merritt.
Touching Lives, teaching people everywhere who Jesus is and why they need Him. This program is sponsored by Touching Lives Ministries and is made possible by the grace of God and your faithful prayers and gifts.